Hey everyone, I've got a great interview with the makers of the powerful, persuasive, award-winning documentary The Invisible War, which examines the ongoing epidemic of sexual assault in the armed forces. So how bad is it? As the film reveals, using information from the Department of Defense, more than 1 in 5 women in the military in 2010 were sexually assaulted. And that number is certainly much higher, since it's estimated that 80% of women who are sexually assaulted don't report it. The Invisible War features interviews with several women who were raped while serving. But shockingly, what was often worse than the assault was what happened afterwards, where investigations were dropped and the women were blamed, silenced, and often punished for speaking up, highlighting a hopelessly broken system that puts way too much power in the hands of commanding officers with an incentive to cover up the crimes. I had a chance to speak to the director of The Invisible War, Kirby Dick, and one of its producers, Amy Ziering, about the film, how America worships its military, and a lot more. So check out my interview with them, and be sure to see The Invisible War in theaters, especially if you know anyone who's in the military. It's mentioned briefly in the film that in one of the cases they cited that rape is an occupational hazard of being in the military. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, the actual wording of the ruling was rape is something that's incident to service. And we were so shocked and appalled by that we called up Susan Burke, the lawyer who had filed this case, and said, you know, incident to service, that's like saying it's an occupational hazard. And she said, yeah, it's exactly the same. So we used that language in our film. But basically the judge did say that rape is an offense, that if it happens to you while you're serving in the U.S. military, you don't have any recourse in the civil justice system.
Does that make it kind of criminally negligent if the military is recruiting women and not telling them, yes, if like rape is just something that happens and you just have to deal with it, or also not warning women that they have a larger than 1 in 5 chance of being raped in the service? I'm trying to think if in the public sector, if that was done, that it would not be tolerated.
Well, that's actually I've had some discussions with people about that. And again, it's really hard to say whether in terms of the military whether it's criminally negligent, but it certainly is something that I think that the military really has to get a handle on this, because there's no question that this is something that they've covered up for many years, and as more and more people know about this, more and more women in particular are really going to be thinking twice about joining the military, which is very unfortunate, because women in the military has actually made the military much stronger, and of course we strongly believe that the women should serve in all aspects of the military. So it's really incumbent on the military to do everything it can to solve this problem.
I was wondering, and this is obviously not to excuse anything, but I was thinking that in the military, which in many ways is where they promote sort of desensitization, and to some degree the soldiers who are considered the best ones are the ones who are desensitized or very aggressive. Is it possible to kind of, in this case, is it asking sort of two contradictory things of soldiers, or would it be hard to get out of the culture?
Not really, because what they found is that process works very well as long as you target the desensitization towards the right people. And unfortunately, what we see, if there's sort of an underlying, however, if you target that towards people that you're working with, it's not good. But if you actually target it towards the enemy per se, or what the military perceives as the enemy, then that's a very effective psychological strategy. And I know that from talking to women and men that have served in the military and asked them what their experiences are, the majority of these women report having really positive and wonderful experiences at very many of the units they served in. What they say the difference is their commander. So it's the climate that the commander actually is fostering within his unit that ensures that this psychological strategy be deployed in the correct way. But if the commander has this attitude where, there's rampant underlying misogyny, the other is women, minorities are targeted as, the enemy within, then you have issues where that psychological strategy of, being fierce and aggressive is turned on the wrong people.
Right. The military has one of the most effective training programs, certainly in boot camp and beyond. And they teach, quite a number of wonderful core values. And we just believe that this should be one of the core values that they teach as well, and they can do that.
It's a topic that I've thought a lot about over the years, which in the U.S. what we seem to have kind of like this what I would call a soldier worship that I think came after Vietnam, when there was this idea that every soldier was getting spat on constantly and we'll never make that again, and you shouldn't ever say anything bad about soldiers. And I was wondering, if this issue, I mean, you were saying earlier that you're shocked that more hasn't been done or said about this. Is that a part of this?
That's a great question. We found that, yes, there's a stigma within the military of ratting out on anyone. So part of the reason that there's so much under reporting of rape is also this sort of internalization of that ideology. You don't really want to tell on your soldier even if they're doing bad things, because then you're sort of stigmatized as sort of not sucking it up and not sort of taking one for the team and sort of ruining that cohesion. So that's interesting. No one's actually asked that question, but in subtle ways, that idea of, we're impervious to critique, you must, defend us, no matter what, we can't have anything bad said about us, I think has played into this sort of fueling this epidemic in a very insidious way.
But, on the flip side, when we showed the film at Sundance, we had, people of all ranks seeing the film, and they responded extremely positive to the film. They were very glad that the film was made, and of course, we've shown it to many, many people within the military and retired after that. And their response is they know that this is an issue, and they're really glad that this issue is getting out. And so, it's incumbent on the Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, to change their policies to such a degree that they go after these serial perpetrators. So that's the change that has to be made.
Ideally, obviously, this is a nonpartisan issue, but it seems that, especially now with the rise of the Tea Party and the Republicans being the pro-military party no matter what, and Democrats constantly being demonized as anti-military, is there more Democratic support to sort of address this issue, and is it being thwarted by Republicans or Tea Party members?
Well, there's certainly more Democratic support, but I don't, at this point, it's hard to say exactly if it's being thwarted. I mean, our perspective on this is it's very much a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. I mean, whether you're Republican or Democrat, we can all agree that we should be supporting the troops who are defending us, and we should be protecting those troops who are defending us. It's really hard to say. We have, certainly a number of, very active conservative Republicans in our film who are very, very outspoken for change on this issue, particularly Congressman Mike Turner from Ohio.
Yeah.
So,
and he's hosting, two of our Hill screenings. He's one of the hosts and champions of the film. So.
Yeah. So, our objective, and I think we'll get there, is that everybody, I think everybody from both sides of the aisle will, I think, eventually come in on this issue. We're hopeful. And
we found when we play the film, it doesn't read as right or left, which is great. Yeah. I mean, it's probably one of the more quote-unquote progressive films on a military issue to ever play in independent festivals.
Yeah, I was actually wondering about that, whether there have been any charges, anyone saying to you, because when you think of even the torture scandal, there were people saying, why is the media always saying bad stuff about soldiers and things like, they're always looking for bad things. I mean, have you gotten any of those charges of liberal filmmakers trying to find something bad about the military?
Well, there was a little bit from people before they saw the film. But once they see the film, I think, they have a completely different response. I mean, because the film is actually paints the military experience in a very positive light, because all of our subjects had wonderful experiences in the military until this rape and the reprisals that followed. And even after that, many of them still want to be in the military. So really what this film is, rather than being a broadside on the military, it's actually a very strong critique on this one aspect of the military where they have not stepped up and really taken care of this issue. And when they do, because this is really a national security issue, they'll have a much stronger military.
Since the film has come out, has there been any action towards? I think that Corey, about her VA charge. Obviously, a lot of times when something gets publicity, then things move very fast. Has there been any of that with any of these cases?
No, but two people after the first screening at Sundance offered to privately pay for Corey's surgery.
There's talk in the film about a sex offenders registry. So right now, if a woman is serving at a base, she cannot look to see if there are any sexual offenders on their base.
There is no military sex offender registry. I'm not sure how, and I think you raise an interesting question as to how someone might know if they might be at risk. This is one of the problems with what the military has done, even though in the last 5 years they've certainly increased the amount of research they've done, but to date, they haven't released the information as to which bases and which units it's happening in, which is not only a problem for the people there, but it's also for a problem for the society to be able to put pressure on particular bases or particular commanders to change things.
So I was wondering, how is it that you pick your topics about what subjects you're going to do documentaries about?
Well, I mean, we've been, very interested in subjects that, deal with social justice. But I think more importantly, we've looked at subjects that really haven't been covered, certainly by films, and in many cases have been very effectively covered up by institutions. I mean, that's one of the roles I think that documentaries can play, particularly with the decline of sort of the investigative journalism departments in newspapers across the country. There's a real need for, I think, documentaries in some ways to fill that role. And what we've done, though, is rather than just focus us on a subject that people are aware of, we like to go into a subject where it's actually been covered up and sort of, like, for example, in this case, not only was the public very unaware of this issue, more so than any other film I've ever done, but in terms of the story around Marine Barracks, Washington, we actually broke a national news story, which is something that's very rare in documentaries, and that's the kind of sort of edge that we're looking for in our films. I'm curious about what are some films that you saw maybe that made you want to go into this work that really changed your mind about a social issue or a political issue? What was the film on fracking? What was that film?
Oh, yeah, Gasland.
Gasland. I actually, that was a film that was very much on the cutting edge of the issue of fracking, where up until that film came out, there were voices of critique on it, but that film, I think, was caused quite a. It was really it was at the cutting edge of this issue. This was an issue where information was being covered up and is still being covered up, and it became a reference point in the discussions and even in the political debates around the country. So that as a model, it really wasn't a model for our film, but as far as making a film about an issue that the public is unaware and these institutions are moving very quickly and in such a way that they're putting the public at risk, I think was a very interesting film.
And Food Inc. for me, I think, I was always it was a tipping point. We all became vegan after that movie in our family, so that's pretty effective.
I'm curious about what would you say to women who are thinking about enlisting?
One of the things we've learned from making this film is how what incredible soldiers, incredible service members women make, and how essential they are to our fighting force. So we absolutely believe very strongly they should be able to serve in all aspects of the military, and there should be no restrictions on them. But this is also an issue that is a real issue, and so it's something that they have to take in consideration. And again, that really shouldn't be their concern. I mean, you would think that when you go into the military, it's the one place that you would be safe from this kind of, be safe from sexual assault. So it's really the responsibility of the military to make it safe to protect these women and men. It's both. As many men as women are assaulted in the military.
And I was at a screening last night where someone said, your film's incredible and it's really empathetic, but there has to be some way that the military understands there's real consequences. And so I hope that they hear and see that, if they feel like this is affecting recruitment and this is having an economic impact on them, not only from an ethical issue, but maybe from an economic one, there'll be more incentive for them to quickly change it. Because, some of the best soldiers are women these days. And as you see in our film, all those women could still be serving. And if you're losing people like that, while perpetrators are still in your ranks, something's very wrong with that picture.
What are the immediate steps that need to be taken, and how can people get involved in pushing for those to happen?
Well, in terms of immediate steps, Secretary Panetta did elevate the level of investigate and prosecute these perpetrators from the level of unit commander up to the level of colonel, and that's an important first step. But it's still within the chain of command. That decision has to be moved outside of the chain of command, where an independent arbitrator will do this investigation and prosecution, like it's done in every other aspect of the justice system. Most importantly, they have to go after these serial perpetrators, in the same way that they fight a war, with that same will, because these are enemies within, and they're really eating up the fighting force from within. And until they do that, until they take that very strong action to investigate, prosecute, and incarcerate those serial perpetrators, they'll continue to eat the fighting force from within.
But I think you're asking what we want viewers to do? Yeah. Right, okay. So if you're asking what you want viewers to do, the most important thing is go to theaters on June 22nd. I mean, it's not from a personal level. It's really actually a strategic and political statement, because it'll send a message to the DOD and to Congress that, the public is interested, the public cares, the word's getting out. It's sort of like voting with your feet. And the more people that show up in theaters the first weekend, which is June 22nd in 4 cities, Washington, D.C., L.A., and San Francisco, then there's a chance we actually get extended and move out to other cities as well. We started a coalition called Invisible No More, and its website is notinvisible.org. And on that website, we have carefully thought through and lay out the various steps that people can do. Some are very easy asks, some are larger asks, but they're all super important and significant. And the most important thing is to keep the pressure on the DOD, to say to Leon Panetta, look, you've said you're moving it up to the level of colonel now. We're not sure, A, are you really going to do that? And B, is that going to really be enough? And to keep the pressure on so that they feel like, they're now being watched, the secret's out, and, change has to happen.